Let's go to Pretoria now for back-to-back analysis. Joining us from our Pretoria studios is political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe. Prof, a very good evening to you. Certainly a very momentous day for South Africa. Everybody having their eyes glued to television screens and listening to the radio and wanting to hear what, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa would have to say. Is this a new chapter, first of all, for the country, for the ANC, and do you think that this is a step in the right direction to try and cleanse South Africa of the challenges that it has been experiencing?
Well, one should start by saying that yesterday we had a president resigning. Today we have a new president. What it does simplify is that we have our system in place, anticipation of changes that may occur, and we have had a smooth transition, which indicates that our democracy is entrenched in terms of processes and systems. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that the ANC has sorted out its own internal battles. And this was expressed in a way by both the opposition parties to say to Cyril Ramaphosa that while we welcome you into this position, we are also mindful of the fact that you are part of the very same team that protected Jacob Zuma, the president of the country then, from accusations and from also being removed through a motion of no confidence. So what they are saying is that in as much as it reflects a change of guard, but at the same time there's an issue of continuity because the same characters are the same players of this new administration. But the long and short of it is that we should actually be celebrating that we do have systems that are in place where there are less disruptions. But what it also shows, which is going to be very difficult for the opposition parties, this is why they could not even field any candidate, is that they would have to come up with or reinvent themselves in terms of how they engage the new president. The walkout by the EFF was a lost opportunity for them to raise some of the issues that as Maimane was able to raise, that we welcome you, but we are also going to remind you that you were part of the previous administration and that we are going to be raising issues with you, which in itself is actually proper, but at least there was a sense of a dignified transition that we should welcome as South Africans.
Well, Prof, I did speak a few moments ago to my colleague Bulelani Philip in Parliament, and he did indicate this is not going to be a walk in the park for Cyril Ramaphosa. While, yes, the goalposts now have been changed, you've got a new president, but there are a number of things that are going to haunt the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa in its very early stages. You've got the Marikana incident. You've got one of the incidents where that you rightly point out, where the opposition would argue that Cyril Ramaphosa was amongst those that kept the former president Jacob Zuma in power by voting against a motion of no confidence to get him out.
Yeah, I think, remember also during the ferocious struggle for leadership within the ANC, there were things that even members of the ANC were pointing out as challenges for Cyril Ramaphosa. So those things are going to come much more stronger now. Cyril at the moment enjoys almost the generosity of, you could say, also the media, because it also shied away from dealing with those issues. And parties like EFF are very keen to exploit that. But it is how you handle that will be more important. It is not what the dirt that is actually thrown at you. And sometimes when people throw dirt at you, it actually expresses their own bankruptcy. But here I think the posture of Cyril might actually be different. It might work in his favor. But it will also be up to the ANC to learn lessons on how to manage perceptions, because in the last administration they were not leading, even though they were a political party that is a ruling party. The opposition was the one that was setting the agenda, and I think this is what the opposition is going to try to do this year.
So are we likely to see the same script with a different cast in the terms of a new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, in that you have the opposition saying this is not going to be a walk in the park. There are some things that Cyril Ramaphosa needs to answer to. Will we still see, perhaps, let's throw forward to tomorrow during the State of the Nation address, perhaps the opposition itself trying to raise some of its concerns while that State of the Nation address is being delivered?
Well, I think the leadership of the ANC is lucky in the sense that Cyril is a person who has been endorsed largely by the media. And the party bosses have been very happy. The CEOs of this country have been very happy. So in a sense, it's going to be very difficult for the opposition parties, especially parties like the DA. If you remember, not so long ago, when Cyril spoke, the DA leader claimed that Cyril has actually taken some of their ideas. But what he was also acknowledging is that we are being made irrelevant by the posture and the language of Cyril Ramaphosa. I think the parties that will probably pose a challenge to him are the parties that are more on the left, like the African People's Convention, as well as the EFF, because those will be singing a different tune. But as far as the parties like UDM, parties like COPE, parties like the IFP, parties like DA, I think his language will be able to accommodate their language and therefore make them less, they'll have to find a different means of saying, how do we argue against somebody who seems to also speak our language?
Yep.
So it is one advantage, but it also shows that the ANC has slightly moved more to the right.
Just very quickly before we let you go, Professor Seepe, what are some of the key things that you think South Africans will want to hear tomorrow about the state of this nation? Some key issues perhaps things that he really needs to put in the forefront to even aspire that kind of confidence in South Africans, given the difficult transition that we've gone through?
Well, the challenges of the majority of South Africans are those who are simply onlookers to economic activity. Yeah. And the issue of jobs is very important for them. Unfortunately, the ANC government has a 9-point plan to deal with issues of infrastructure, which was also frustrating the business, because what business was saying is that we need to address and reduce the cost of doing business in this country. We need to have investors. But at the same time, the ANC must also be concerned about the number of protests that talk about the failure at the level of delivery. So they need to strengthen their capability to implement and to be able to deliver services. If you look at most of the protests, they are largely at the local level, and it will be roads, it will be schooling, it will be the violence, the gangsterism. So all those issues that people express on a daily basis, they need to be addressed. It will be issues of land. So that will be a challenge. And another challenge that he must address is the issue of higher education for poor black students. Yep. Because what we need to do is that we need to create hope for the young people, because they are in a majority, that your poverty should not be a stumbling block to you having access to the opportunities that all other people have, those with monies. So that will be the challenge that Cyril is going to face immediately. But the ANC seems to be, when you look at the resolutions of the conference, they seem to be alive to those issues.
Professor Sipho Seepe, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We'll certainly all be watching the State of the Nation address tomorrow to see what are the key issues that the new president of the country will focus on.